On a warm autumn evening in 1998, Harris County Police received a call regarding a potential armed robbery. The call came from an apartment neighboring the reported disturbance, with reports of a man going crazy with a gun. Not long after, police arrived at John Lawrence Jr.'s unlocked apartment, where they entered without a warrant, guns drawn. What they reportedly found was in fact not an armed robbery or a domestic disturbance, but rather, John Lawrence in his own bed in his own private property having intimate relations with a man named Tyrone Garner. Tyrone's ex-boyfriend was the one who made the call. He arguably tried to get them killed by lying to police as a way to get back at them. Now, Texas police had a few options here. They could have warned them and let them go about their evening. They could have issued a citation, or they could throw them both in jail. See, in 1998, the Supreme Court hadn't decriminalized homosexuality yet, so Lawrence and Gardner had to make their own way through this situation.
They just yelled, threw me back on the couch. It's just all of a sudden, we're taking you downtown. I wasn't allowed to put clothes on. I was handcuffed and dragged downstairs.
To make matters worse for the two, they were actually innocent of all crime by their own account, even if you consider homosexuality a crime. While 2 of 4 officers on the scene failed to note any case of homosexual activity, the other 2 had conflicting statements. One officer claimed he saw oral, and the other one claimed he witnessed anal. Despite this, and the victims claiming they never had intimate relations, the police report ended up detailing an aggressive act of sodomy between 2 drunk men. The judge working on the case publicly doubted any validity of these charges, but went on with the case anyway because they were scared of giving this case to the gay activists. Taking the advice of their lawyers, Lawrence and Gardner pleaded no contest to the misdemeanor charge and paid their fines. This is actually one of the less problematic things the Texas legal system did to queer people around that time. In fact, just 14 years prior to this case, a man named Calvin Burdine was given the death penalty in a murder case, because since he's gay, he'd enjoy getting assaulted in prison too much, according to the prosecutor, so the death sentence it was. He was later found innocent after being on death row for nearly 20 years. Lawrence and Garner had nothing to lose. They already had criminal records, and they had just been outed in the middle of early 2000s Houston, Texas. They teamed up with a civil rights organization and appealed their case to the Supreme Court, which surprisingly ruled in their favor 6-3. Lawrence v. Texas, a 2003 ruling, legalized homosexuality nationwide. You heard me right, 2003, less than 20 years ago. I am old enough to have witnessed both the legalization of homosexuality and gay marriage. And I'm clearly not senator age by any stretch. While Lawrence and Garner won this case and single-handedly reshaped the country with their victory, the opposition never fully went away. When you have people in power before 2003 calling innocent people fairies who'd enjoy prison too much to get anything but the death penalty, they don't just magically disappear after 2003, though they may work in more subtle ways during times of mainstream pushes for equality. Within minutes of Trump's inauguration, all mentions of LGBT people were immediately scrubbed from all government websites. What followed was a non-stop assault on the personal freedom of Americans, including weekly attacks on LGBT rights. With growing corruption and dysfunction within our government, the Supreme Court was becoming increasingly important to securing our rights. Lawrence v. Texas was never codified into law, neither was gay marriage or abortion, and Trump knew this. He proceeded to bring in 3 new Supreme Court justices over his single-term presidency, now making up 30% of the Supreme Court, with the rest of the conservative majority coming from the Bush administration. By late 2020, it was starting to feel a bit hopeless as far as our rights are concerned. As Trump-appointed Justice Amy Coney Barrett took the stand, looking as frigid as ever, she began to confirm our worst fears. When asked about the precedent for gay marriage and gay intimacy, she outright refused to talk about it. This even piqued the interest of the same civil rights group that got Lawrence to the Supreme Court to begin with. Justice Barrett used words like sexual preference to imply being gay is a choice, and it began to feel like the dam holding back all this pent-up extremism building on the fringes for decades was finally ready to burst, and it did. By May of 2022, we began to see a massive wave of pent-up extremism from our own government. Namely, the leaked Supreme Court draft opinion written by Bush-appointed Justice Samuel Alito. Look, I know it's tasteless to dig at someone's appearance, but can we please confiscate their ivermectin or whatever, because half our government looks like they're melting. Anyways, in the draft opinion between all the failed clock drawings, there were some very disturbing texts to uncover. There's direct mentions of Lawrence v. Texas and Obergefell versus Hojas as being invalid for the same reasons as abortion. That these rulings aren't deeply rooted in history and American tradition, nor are they mentioned in the Constitution. Though the draft opinion itself is honestly pretty unparsable, as Alito later contradicts himself by saying he doesn't want to cast doubt on anything other than Roe v. Wade, even though he just spent the first 60 pages of the draft to do just that. But what disturbed me the most, however, was Bush-appointed Justice Clarence Thomas after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade this June. In his concurring opinion published by the Supreme Court, he states that we should reconsider birth control, gay marriage, and most disturbingly of all, Lawrence v. Texas. I think it's time we seriously reconsider our approach to the Supreme Court. The fact that a small group of unelected judges can make choices for the entire American public during their lifetime appointments is insane. One way we could put a stop to this is essentially forcing the fascist majority of the Supreme Court back into a minority again, by filling the Supreme Court with more justices under a Democratic president. The problem is, our president has the political impact of a brisk wind during a hurricane, so I don't think he's gonna do much other than continue to escape the retirement home. Also, the entire concept of the Supreme Court is functionally pointless considering the world we live in. Their whole job is to make rulings based on their interpretation of the Constitution, a document that predates electricity, and I think these past few years have clearly shown that interpretation is just code for bending this arbitrarily powerful historic text to whatever the majority wants at that given time. And when I say majority, I don't mean the majority of the public, I mean the majority of the Supreme Court. The unfortunate fact is, even if the Supreme Court did finally lose its power, that might not be enough. Since I announced my move from LA to Texas, my inbox is full of the following. Liberals telling me I'm not welcome here because I'm trans, and conservatives will beat me up. Meanwhile, conservatives excitedly welcoming me and encouraging me to move here faster. Interesting. Well, let's take a look at the official 2022 Texas Republican Party platform. Okay, so on page 21 it says the following. Homosexuality is an abnormal lifestyle choice. We believe there should be no granting of special legal entitlements or creation of special status for homosexual behavior, regardless of state of origin. And we wish to oppose all efforts to validate transgender identity. Interesting indeed. Honestly, the entire GOP platform Texas put out last week has really been a wild read. Doctors can prescribe experimental treatments with seemingly no repercussions or regulation. Adult entertainment should be considered a public health crisis. A ban on needle exchange or supervised injection sites for drug addicts, focusing on faith-based abstinence, love that. Abolishing the Department of Education, and the EPA, and the Endangered Species Act. Not to mention, seceding from the United States. If Texas were to actually leave the United States, maybe then we would actually have a southern border crisis on our hands, because if they made true on all these proposals, Texas would become a third world country with stricter views on abortion than even the Taliban. No, I'm not joking here. On page 6, they define human life, and therefore all human rights, as beginning at the moment of fertilization, making anything that interferes with fertilized eggs attaching to the uterine wall illegal. This could include some antidepressants, acne treatments, anti-inflammatory drugs, and a whole host of unrelated medications. Honestly, there is so much going on in this year's GOP platform that I don't have time to go into it all, especially not in a short video like this. The takeaway here is that if the Republican Party has their way, we could see a massive regression in this country that could take us back to where Lawrence and Garner were 24 years ago, or worse, because it's not just Texas. We have Republican senators calling for the return of segregation on Twitter, only to later vaguely pass it off as a joke, I guess? Never mind, apparently he's from Texas again, clearly a safe space for minorities. Okay, I promise it's not just Texas. Nationwide, there's been over 300 anti-LGBT bills proposed this year, and some states are using the recent Supreme Court decision to fortify these bills. Alabama Bill SB 184, which I mentioned in my last video, is now being linked to the overturning of Roe v. Wade by Attorney General Steve Marshall's new court documents. If successful, this will make providing gender-affirming healthcare to minors a felony. The fascinating thing about all of this is that there's a lot of Republicans out there that are appalled by what their own party is doing. you have people who consider themselves pro-life, but will say things like, yeah, I'm pro-life, but if it's either the mother or the child, the mother should get to live. And that's something that the Republican Party doesn't really want to represent. And this isn't the first time this has happened either. I knew a lot of moderate Republicans in 2016 who were surprised by Trump's nomination, to say the least, but they begrudgingly went along with it because that's their team. This is the sign of an increasingly undemocratic system. 70% of Americans support gay marriage, 64% support protecting trans people from discrimination, and 70% support a woman's right to choose. This is just the tip of the iceberg of things that most of us support but we might not get to keep. And the things that we've never had, like decriminalized cannabis or stronger gun control, are even more popular, with as much as 90% support. Make no mistake, this push backwards is not coming from the majority. It's pent-up extremism from the political fringes desperately trying to take over the Republican Party. And it is partially working. More Republicans oppose things like peaceful protests, or abortion in the case where it's risking the mother's life. But that's not to say it's entirely working. Society as a whole, the sort of average opinion of society, has improved over the past 20 years quite a lot. General American society used to be far more supportive and accepting of laws that victimize innocent people like Lawrence and Garner, and we've made major strides since then. I just hope moving forward, Republicans wake up and don't remain complicit in this race to inflict unspeakable harm to millions in this country. Anyway, that'll be it for this video. I want to know what you guys think of this newer mini-episode format. I plan to release these every 2 to 4 weeks in between larger videos, so leave a comment down below of what you thought, and if you liked the video, remember to feed the algorithm by liking, subscribing, all of that. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.